countries in Latin America, indigenous populations are relatively large populations. In Bolivia, it's about 70% of the total population. In Ecuador, it's about 30%. Guatemala is 50%. So if you see the strategies of indigenous populations where they are rather large instead of a very small minority, it may be different from other countries. So in this context, the survival and the resistance has to do very much with maintaining cohesiveness in a rather large population. Because despite centuries of policies of trying to eliminate populations, they have not been able to eliminate the population because they are so large. And secondly, they have very strong strategies for survival and for resilience. So in the case of Guatemala, as I say, it's about half of the total population, and with a very strong and ancestral system that is not only about health, but it's also about administration of justice and conflict resolution, which is still maintained. It has been even before the Spanish colonizer came, and still they maintain. In Guatemala, the state apparatus doesn't reach all rural communities, so it's still the indigenous system of maintaining peace, justice, and administering conflict resolution still prevail. And all official statistics shows that indigenous territories has the lowest rates of crime, despite some not even having police forces, not having not having any press of the judiciary. They managed to resolve a very, very low crime. But also, ancestral medicine is very strong. And what I want to address as a discussion of Guatemala, but talking at the global level, is the situation in which the current ancestral knowledge of health and medicine is under attack by those organizations that you may not be thinking are going to be under attack. For instance, I'm going to use the example of traditional birth attendants and what has been happening in the last 15, 20 years because of international policies and goals on reducing maternal mortality and improving delivery in hospitals. So as you may know, the health policy or the international organizations are not even aware or not interested in indigenous issues. They set up their own goals. Their own goals about almost a universal access to hospital deliveries because should be delivered in hospitals, and using Western providers for delivery. But of course, with no respect or not even questioning, is it everybody needs to deliver in a hospital or not, or how this country is being delivered. So in practice, this kind of policies for countries such as Guatemala has meant that healthcare providers have to achieve targets of improving hospital deliveries, and targets also of reducing the number of deliveries that happen through traditional birth attendants. Communities and movements, because there are also social movements looking for the recognition of ancestral knowledge and practices as a contribution to their own communities and also as a contribution to the state goals of improving health and education. So that sounds good, but what it means that recognition implies that if you have been serving your community service provider, then we want to be recognized and to be economically benefited because of it. So there is a movement of indigenous practitioners saying that if we are the one delivering babies and you're actually not doing it, then we should be recognized for that. If we are the traditional healers that we actually provide them support and you're not doing it, we should be recognized for that. And there is a movement also of asking for recognition, but also that it means that they should receive compensation from government for the services that they do. And it's a strong movement that is still growing in different countries, not only in Guatemala. It's in Bolivia, very strong. It's also in some parts of Mexico, which is growing. It's saying that instead of being attacked, we should fight back by saying that we have been actually been fulfilling the responsibility that the state not fulfilling, and we should be compensated for that. But this kind of strategy has also some potential risk. some of the risks that it has is that means that if you're going to be compensated, then the state will have the authority to certify and supervise who is providing, who is not. So that means that the control that they have always had about their own practice now is going to be asked to the state, because the state now has to regulate and do the certification of the provider.
The full results are getting, they're in the final stages of coming out as a report by the end of this year. Care by DICE during and after childbirth. And as you see, the 6 Jiva shepherds are listed there. Next slide. Okay, this is a multi-site, multidisciplinary research study which investigated the traditional midwives or DICE in 4 diverse cultural and environmental settings in India using approaches of ethnography, public health, and midwifery to bring out the relevance of DICE towards strengthening midwifery care services. The study shows overall that the DICE practice on the basis of knowledge and skills evolved through apprenticeship and experiential learning within an ethical framework of serving birthing women and newborns. Himachal Pradesh, Jharkhand, Karnataka, Maharashtra. The study populations in each site was roughly 10,000, amounting to our target was 40,000, so it's 41,500. And then we studied 30 DICE in each area in depth. 15 of them were the most popular and experienced DICE in the community, and then we wanted to compare their experience and their profiles with more ordinary DICE who are still kind of apprenticed or still younger, but practicing DICE. So total of 30 in each place, 120. And that actually compared with around 35 to 40 other providers of maternity services who were also interviewed from their points of view in each of the sites. Next. This is simply there to show you that these are the various kinds of primary attendants in home births. And you have self, family, DAI, Anganwadi worker, and then they become negligible in home births after that. The unqualified village practitioner or RMP, private doctor, etc. You can see that ahead of the DAI is the vast majority. 352 out of 418. Okay, while the DICE local cultural environmental contexts, even their languages differ widely. Their principles behind using their skills are remarkably consistent, and this is just a very few examples. Using warm oil massage this is during labor, to put a woman at ease, assess her womb and fetal position and condition, and ease her childbirth progress all at once. Using anatomy and physiology to enhance the woman's own efforts, bringing gravity into play with both the body of the woman and of the DAI herself. That means a lot of parts of her body, her hands, of course, even her forehead, her knees, her feet, her heels, and then using natural, commonly available herbal substances to strengthen or to slow down womb contractions. There are some examples. Next. Another striking commonality is the idea that the source of the jiva, this is the source of the name of the project also, the jiva or the life force is in the placenta, an idea also found in other traditional communities in South Asia, Africa, and South America. We can go into that in some detail, but afterwards. Moreover, the dyes assert that this life force, or they also call it breath, or heat, pran, atma, the soul, this passes with the blood through the navel cord, and they can even bring alive a freshly stillborn baby through stimulating the placenta if the baby doesn't cry. And this we have a number of we have documented this to quite some extent. Moreover, the dyes assert. I shall see the photographs of two. Oh, we had two photographs of these two. I think I have them somewhere. Anyway, maybe I don't. Out of the 120 dyes, placental stimulation to revive a still baby had been done by 31. I think it's more than 31. I think that something's wrong there. I think it's about 52%. I think it is, the 52% is proper and the other figure is wrong. But anyway, it's a large number of the dyes. All of them had heard about it, and especially they all accept and do this massaging the cord toward the baby, not with the idea that the blood, that they're helping just the blood to go, but it's the life force that's going into the baby, the breath, the spirit, everything. Next. Dyes' critical views of hospital childbirth, not allowing a woman to squat during the childbirth or take another birth position as she prefers, but rather making her lie down to push, makes it much more difficult for the woman and the process. In normal labor, depriving a woman of food, drink, and walking around is just not helpful. Institutions don't recognize or permit dyes to use their skills, but despite restrictions, dyes often enter the labor rooms and help with the births. This is what we found in our study. Now, this is even in the time since the fieldwork, it's much less and ended in some places. There should be no hurry to cut the cord before the placenta has fallen, as it is harmful, and not hurrying benefits the baby in several ways. Institutions lack understanding of how key rituals can help to ease a woman's labor and birth. Some of those rituals are like, opening the hair, or opening, taking off a necklace, or opening any kind of thing, so that everything becomes open, the body becomes open, and birth is helped. That's just one example of ritual that's helpful. Well, maternity setups often charge too much. Dyes don't receive any monetary compensation for their work. And they say, Ashas don't do much at all, and they take everything.
Complications that the dyes have narrated that they've had to handle and handle successfully. As it's written, I'm saying, restarting stalled pains, so it's getting labor pains, contractions to get re-kick start again, handling breech presentations, handling awkward position during childbirth, particularly face or brow presentation is called, where the head should come down like this and it comes like this. They've managed to get those babies out. They've managed to get a transverse fetus and manipulate it into head down position. Sometimes when the hand or the cord comes out, they've pushed the hand and the cord back in order to facilitate the birth. They've got the woman to move around and adopt different positions in labor, like squatting, Squatting actually increases the pelvic bone a little bit so that the head can get out, and when you're flat on your back, the pelvic bone can open up. So to get her to move around and adopt different positions facilitates that. A situation called shoulder dystocia, which doctors might know of, is when the head comes out and the shoulder gets stuck underneath the pelvic bone, and this is a major cause of babies dying at birth. And the DIs have handled many such births successfully. The cord, when it's stuck around the neck, that we've had I know of a DI who actually she pushed the head back in enough that she could release the cord from around the neck, so that after pulling the cord around, then she could get the baby out. Retained placenta, so they've actually manually removed the placenta by hand. Prevention of, like after the birth, the woman is often so exhausted she faints, or they say she becomes unconscious, behosh ho jati. And she's helped the woman regain her consciousness. And there's various techniques to prevent postpartum fever infection. They do a lot of fumigation and other such techniques, and a lot of breastfeeding problems, because the DIs, they stay with the mother, or they come every day to the mother's house for 6 days at least after the delivery. So a lot of any problems of breastfeeding, so she's also taking care of all that. Apart from this list, I'd like to say that in our health center we have a very good rapport with many of the local DIs, and they're much better, I think, than doctors are at assessing a woman, whether she's in labor or not, and when she's going to deliver or not. So they can tell you in their own language and in their own way what is the effacement, or whether the baby's engaged or not, or And usually when we ask her, what's her situation like, and she can tell you, and you don't need to bother doing that examination again, because it's already been done in the community before she comes. So she knows, and these are things that we have not really taught them how to do. This is something from their traditional knowledge.
We've had to learn it.
We've had to learn it from them. We've had MBBS doctors coming to our centre who don't know how to do a vaginal examination, and she's been taught from the DIs how to do a vaginal examination. And I'll end my little bit of whatever I'm saying is about a story about one of our DIs. She's called Vigila. And there was a woman in her village who was, she'd had a cesarean in a previous pregnancy, and this time her baby was lying in transverse position, and she was, her husband, in order to avoid a hospital delivery and another cesarean, the husband called a doctor, RNP doctor from the village. So he was loading oxytocin to give her IM injections in the village in order to get the baby out. And Vigila landed up and said, if you push that into her now, then I'm not coming to your house ever again, and all your births you'll do yourself. So that was enough, so they kicked the doctor out. Then she was brought to us to get a second opinion that this woman, if she doesn't get to a hospital fast, she's going to have a ruptured uterus. So quickly, Vigila and the woman went off to a government hospital in the next district of Purulia in West Bengal. It's a massive hospital, absolutely filthy, but never mind. On admission, the nurse did a very cursory examination and said, oh, she's in very early labor, she's only 1 centimeter dilated, and just dumped her on the bed in the ward. She didn't even look at her abdomen to see that there was a scar on it. And she was not able to make out that this was a transverse lie. So Vigila ran around the hospital looking for a doctor, which it is not easy to find a doctor in a hospital. But she found one, and she told the doctor in the doctor's own language, कि ये transverse lie है, अगर जल्दी उसका operation नहीं होगा तो उसमें बचना नहीं पड़ेगी. So the doctor, knowing this, it's a red light. So the doctor came running to the woman in the ward, and the woman had a cesarean section within 10 minutes, and the mother and baby was saved. So this shows, I mean, all these things that the dyes are doing in the community, they also know their limits, and they don't just stay in the community. They move from the community to our health center, to higher health centers, to tertiary level. They don't say, oh, this is my limit now, which is what ASHA and the other government health workers do, what doctors do. They refer to a higher center, but they don't refer and go along with them to the higher center. So this is the role of the dye. She's very much in the community, of the community, but she doesn't stay in the community and just send people out. This is my little story at the end.
ಸಂಘಟನೆ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿದಂದ್ರಿಗಿನ ನಾವು ಕೃಷಿ ಕೂಲಿ ಕಾರ್ಮಿಕರ ದಲಿತ ಮಹಿಳೆಯರ ಜೊತೆಗೇನೆ ನಾವು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ.
I have been working in the movement for the last 20 years, and this movement is mainly focusing on the women's empowerment. We work with the Dalit, mainly with the Dalit movement, and while working with the Dalit women, we have found out about the situation of the dire situation of the women there, and also learned a lot about the health situation of the women. And that's triggered us to learn about using herbal medicines to treat primary diseases of the women there. And not just learn, we also prepare medicines and give it to the women who are in need of it. So this is a oil mainly used for skin related ailments, mainly by the description. So it looks like eczema, itching, and any cuts. So this oil also is topically applied over the skin and mainly used for joint pains and body pains. So they also massage it after applying over the area. So this is hair oil applied to stop dandruff, and if there is burning sensation in eyes, this is also applied to have a cooling effect and also generally believed to increase hair growth. So this herbal preparation is called Lode Sara, mainly simply the juice of the aloe vera plant, and is used for menstrual irregularities and if there is white discharge in women. So the first skin oil that is prepared for skin ailments that is prepared here is derived from these two plants. Mainly derived from the amla of the gooseberry plant. And neem. Both. So this oil, which is used for joint pains and body pains, is derived from the herbs locally called as lekke and ekke. Lekke gida is also known as scientific terms. It's called Vitex negundo, and ekke gida is known as Calotropis gigantea. And so the extracts from these plants are infused into coconut oil and then used. The hair oil is prepared from gooseberry, hibiscus flower, and aloe vera. So the oil and other medicines are prepared and only distributed through the movement. So every week there are people who come and then are distributed on that particular day of the week. And during those weekly meetings, they also do the campaign on health awareness. And during that, they also distribute this, and also general health awareness sessions are done. And during this, they also give information about the denial of health rights for the marginalized communities and particularly the Dalit communities. So they also talk about how the herbal or traditional medicine is being pushed aside, and there is an awareness that is built during this meeting about how to push it forward. And in that course, they also made some demonstrations in front of government hospitals. So I don't know to read and write. I am an illiterate, but when we come to places like this, it also makes me feel to read again and write and learn again. But the work that we are doing has made us very happy, and inspires us to do much more work.
Just want to start singing a song, a hope song that was sung to me in my first fieldwork period by a healer that is called Ponciano Ramos. Chant now, Otpan, chant now, Otpan. This song in hope language tells a story, and this story is like our most important outcome in our action research process. That was the insight of many of the participants, the indigenous participants, that they need to create new learning contexts to share shamanic and indigenous medicine learnings between in an intercultural manner and fashion. So after this action research, they started to ask for collaboration and for money to create several rounds of ayahuasca. That is a very important psychoactive substance in this context, in this regional context, and it's vital to these kinds of knowledge that they share and that can make shamanism and indigenous medicine still vital in many of these communities. So our research started 2 years ago, and it's a partnership between the Indigenous movement, the Institute of Development Studies, Brazilian Health Unlimited, and it's part of an Equal Voices project that promoted a comparison between health systems in Brazil and Mozambique. We started to do this research. We composed indigenous and non-indigenous team. We had 2 indigenous leaders, Marcelino Massa and Antenor Azevedo, that is a district health counselor. And we visited 27 communities around this region, and we realized 100 interviews with persons. And so we started to discuss in the communities how vital is indigenous medicine in this region. So, and we find that we have 22 in this specific area, 22 spell shamans that are acting in 27 communities visited. We have 3 full hoop shamans, just shamans of this ethnic group that is the most marginalized group in the region, and of them 2 are elders and just 1 is a young man that are in training to be a new full shaman. So I'll present some data on hoop people, indigenous medicine. They are about 22,700 people, and they live in 35 communities. And actually, they are suffering with health problems like children malnutrition, high rates of child mortality, tuberculosis, and increasing epidemic suicide case. The basis of their indigenous medicine is the work of these specialists that are not recognized by government as health specialists, and it creates a very problem to this region. There are 3 categories of these shaman specialists that are full shaman, that is called show, it's pajé, and healers that are called kun hook in, that are ayahuasca shamans, and bin hook in that are spell shamans. And so they can promote healing, they can promote protection by blowing and with all this verbal art of spell. And I will show how it works a little bit, but it's very, very important to treat many of the diseases of this region, and also in childbirth, and also in several other processes, and so on. And this verbal art is important to dynamics of conflict in this region, because they can cause harm also.
Traditional medicine systems. There are 2 forms of traditional medical categories here. One is the codified knowledge system, which is there in the Ayurveda, Siddha, the Unani kind of textbooks. There are also the regional textbooks related to Ayurveda, Siddha, and so on. And we have another set is the largely undocumented oral traditions, which are ecosystem specific, ethnic community specific, and so on. And I'm trying to, in the context of politics of knowledge, I'm trying to map how the division of this codified and the folk became very prominent, and some of the works that we have done to revitalize the local health tradition, as we call it today. So if you look at the biodiversity and the usage of medicinal plants, in India around 8,000 medicinal plants are being used in traditional medical systems. And out of which, if you look at the codified Ayurveda, Siddha, Unani, they use around 2,000 medicinal plants. But the local health traditions use a much larger number, which is around 4,500 to 5,000 medicinal plants. So this is just to give you the diversity of knowledge that is existing in the oral, uncodified, undocumented traditional medical systems. Now, if you look at the historical thing, the politics is very interesting. Mid-19th century, you can see already that there is some sort of formalization that is happening in traditional medical systems in India. And by 20th century, early 20th century, when the pharmaceuticalization happened of traditional medicines in India, with the Shivrats and the Kavirats in West Bengal, or the warrior families in Kerala and other parts of Karnataka and so on, you can already see the access to traditional medical knowledge increase and the spread increase. So it was in 1900 that the slow process of formalization started. And during the independence movement, we had a strong force of All India Ayurvedic Congress, which became part of the whole movement of independence and so on. But the factual division actually happens in 1970, when the Indian Medical it's called the Indian Medical Central Council Act, which was which was established in 1970, where it said that only people who are institutionally qualified can any longer practice any system of medicine. So till then who were the eminent practitioners of village, of the agroecology and the ecosystem and the community-specific practices suddenly becomes marginalized. So before 1970, it was called indigenous medicine, but by 1970, it is called, there is another division called Indian systems of medicine. Now, how was this, how was this confronted with? The NGOs and the civil society organizations in 1980s start forming what is called the Lok Swasthya Parantara Samvardhan Samiti, which was somewhere in 1980s, 86 was the first meeting in Kaladi in Kerala, then subsequently in Kashele in 1988. And how that formation actually argued that the local ecosystem specific, community specific, agroecology specific knowledge had significant relevance in Indian healthcare scenario. And what it said, it is very important for population self-reliance, it is very important for rights of communities, it's very important for understanding the biocultural and geographical diversity within the country, and it also said it's important for livelihoods, the protection of that knowledge, and so on. So the argument of local health traditions, which was then called folk medicine or indigenous medicine, was slowly becoming a powerful force through this understanding of population self-reliance, this idea of indigenous rights, and so on. And in 2002, we have the first national policy, which was the National Indian Systems of Medicine policy, which first talked about the local health traditions as a separate category. And it acknowledged the relevance in Indian context, but it continued to be marginalized. Now, if you come to the latest policy, the National Health Policy of 2017, which is a very beautiful document, again, it talks a lot about the local healers, their promotion, and so on. But what has happened in the process, the codified systems of medicine or the institutionalized medicine started further marginalizing. So how biomedicine was marginalizing Ayurveda and Siddha and so on, Ayurveda and Siddha started marginalizing further this. So today, in official documents, in national health policy, etc., they are called no more Vaidyas or local healers, they are called traditional community health providers. They are not practitioners anymore. So they are like community health workers and so on. So on the one hand, LHT became prominent, but on the other hand, there was a suppression and it was marginalized, and it is now called, so you cannot use the word practitioner anymore, or a word like Vaidya for a practitioner. So this is the politics. Now what it constitutes, early on, when the civil society movement on local health tradition in India started, it had a broad canvas. It talked about the traditional birth attendance with the projects that were shared earlier, the big documentations like her healing heritage, the publications like Touch Me Not, which highlighted the exemplary work of traditional birth attendants, traditional bone setters, practitioners of eye, who are intergenerational. I mean, in South India, still there is a living tradition of eye practitioner, which is the 13th generation of people who treat eye diseases in Pondicherry. And that's a very live tradition even today. Like that, so many extensive traditions that exist. But through all this process, when we address governance and accountability, the main idea is to promote this not in documents, but promote this as active social tradition. So, like every village, if you go to in India, you can see people brushing with neem sticks, and even today it's a common thing. But now you have neem pastes available. But how do you preserve the tradition of still using that neem stick wherever it's contextually relevant? And it's spatially and contextually relevant. In those contexts, how do we preserve it? So the documentation approach is mainly for that. So, and the basic philosophy is that promote what is positive, discard what is distorted. And if you don't know about something, maybe do better research on that and try to prove that.